at the fire department that I used to go to all the time as a kid. I used to come here and ride my bike all the way around the building with my friends. There was a kid named Queen. We called him by his last name like Cartman, but we called him Queen. And then there was my friend Lewis and another friend of ours named Chris. We would ride around this station all the time and play Transformers, G.I. Joe. I played, most of the time my bike was bigger than the rest of them, so I usually played Optimus Prime. And then my friends would ride around with me and I had glasses, so if we were playing G.I. Joe, I normally played the Baroness, which I still do play the Baroness. But this was my playground back whenever I was a kid. When I was a kid, my sister and I used to do this all the time. And we'd grab like these little tiny apples when the boys were riding by on their bikes and bombard them. And that was our missiles or our bombs whenever we were the Transformers playing around here. But this, I used to climb this all the time when I was a kid. Such fun memories. This used to be the house of my best friend back in the early 80s. She was a 70-year-old lady that I had met when I was about 10 years old, and we just clicked and we were best friends. I used to come over to her house every single night. Her name was Dolly. But this house has changed over the years. It doesn't look the same. But this was her house back in the 80s, and I remember her husband's name was Buzz, and he died like a year or so before I met her. Anyhow, she told me so much about the 1920s, when she was a child and back whenever she was in World War II. It's just very much an education, and I've never ever forgotten her. Just a lot of happy memories of this old lady named Dolly. She was my best friend. This is Rosemary again at another location, Harlan Avenue. That's the street that I grew up on from the age of 8 days old on up to 10 years old. And on this street, if you'll follow me this way, keep my mom busy here for a second. The house is no longer here, but our house used to be right here, and right next door to this house here, from which was built on, is a Stafford's house. That was my best friend Gwen's house. And if you look over this way, the house has changed quite a bit since then. But this was Shafe's house. This is Melissa Shafe's house. She was another one of my best friends. Missy and Gwen, both my best friends on this street, Harlan Avenue. From the, like I said, from the age I was 8 till about 8 days old to about 10 years old. And if you look on up the street here, other friends we had were the Knowles. And their daughters were about 7 or 8 years older than us, so they used to babysit my sister and I throughout the 70s when my mom and dad wanted to have a free moment. But this is a street I remember from when I was about 10 years old. Say hi, Gwen.
Oh, no, I'm not saying hi.
What? Lots of history here in the back of my parents' house that I grew up from age 10 up until I was in my 20s. And I still lived here a little bit right before I moved to Philadelphia. But in this house here, my uncle used to live up these steps. And when we was kids, I used to take my best friend Lewis up here. And we would, that was after I turned 10, because whenever I was in Harlan, it was Melissa and it was Gwen. So I moved over here, and Lewis quickly became one of my best friends. But we would climb up these stairs, go around on the roof, and one time we climbed all the way up to the tip top of the roof, and we started doing a rain dance. And my dad's down there working on the car, not paying attention, and next thing I know, my mom runs out and says, "Who's moving around on top of the roof?" And it was me and Lewis doing a rain dance. Another time, now this is years ago too, my parents were out of town. They trusted me to stay at home while they went to my grandma's. So my friends Louis and Ray came over, and Ray decided he was going to climb up from these stairs onto the roof, run back and forth, and then jump off and do a twirl onto the grounds. We were such daredevils, it's insane. And on the other side of this garage, that we used to put a big trampoline, and the boys would run off the side of this garage roof and jump on the trampoline. And so help me, we were so lucky that we survived our teenage years. Behind me used to have an Italian guy named Joe, and he was diagonal from our house. We'd come over here and he had a serious green thumb. He used to plant all kinds of flowers, but he was full-blooded Italian. And when he got mad at one of the neighbors, you would not be able to, you couldn't tell anything he was saying. It was all in Italian, but he was such a lovable guy. And from the age of 10 on up, he always swore I was going to marry one of his grandsons. It didn't work out that way, but he was just a wonderful person, and it's fond memories again. Very few remains of what was here one time. There used to be a basketball hoop right up here.
You can see
And
the circle.
yeah, you can still see the circle up there. Basketball hoop up there. I used to shoot baskets all the time with friends. And at one point we had all the neighbor boys over here playing basketball. And one I remember the most was a guy named Cliff Barnes. He came over and he used to shoot baskets all the time, and my mom would come out here and say, all right, stop knocking at the windows, stop knocking at the windows. And one time she got fed up with it and said, okay, Cliff, you're out of here. And he turned around and gave her the full moon. And my mom was just so stunned. It's just always adventures around this house, though. My whole childhood was nothing but adventures. May 21st, 1986. I was here, is what it says. And I'm going to zoom in on that a little bit.
See if I got it good.
You interview movie stars?
Yeah.
I've done a lot of the voice actors. I talked to people
I've
like
always wanted
Davy
to be one of
Jones.
those.
But you know what? We've seen Back to the Future with her. We've seen Daisy Duke.
1986.
And we've seen the...
And my
I
sister's
seen the-
mark is up here too.
But we've seen a lot of stars going through her.
But you can really see mine on there. Another sign of my childhood from this house that used to say RC for RC Cola. For some reason or another, being obsessed with Transformers, I spelled RC the same as RC Cola. But another nerdy moment of my life, and that had to be around 1986 whenever I put that in there. Very faded and worn now, but it's still there. I'm sure many of you have heard me mention that I get my artistic talents from my dad when it comes to drawing. This is his remembering of things from back in the 80s out of his sketchbook. And, well, actually not from the 80s, from the 50s, because he was in Akron, Ohio throughout the 60s and remembers it during the 50s, too. This was the Gala Drive-In that my dad and I used to go to all the time back in the 80s, 70s, and 80s. And in the 80s, my dad and I would get along the fence and watch the movie from the side. And it's how we watched a lot of movies. We'd walk over there and listen to it from the fence side, laying on the hill watching it. Of course, these cars weren't the ones pulling in, but this is his remembrance of the gala as classic cars pulled in through the drive-thru. The gala when Weber Without a Cause was playing. This is one of my dad's drawings, too. All of these are my dad's drawings, actually. This is Springfield Lake, going down towards the roller rink. And the houses aren't here now, but back in the day there wasn't too many houses along the way, and my parents' house right now is right about in this location here. But back in the day, when this first came out, like you see, it's in the 1920s, my dad drew a sign of that. This is all from Springfield Lake Park, which is where my parents live. This was part of Springfield Lake, the drawing of it my dad did, where they had a trolley line that came from Akron into Lakemore in Springfield Lake, where the Springfield Lake Park used to be. And the dance hall is still there, which I'm going to show you in person here in a few minutes. And the roller rink is still here. The roller rink actually is where I used to roller skate all the time. And this trolley line would take people from Akron back in the 1920s back up here so they could go to the park. And my dad drew all this. This is Strickland's, that is near my parents' house, an ice cream stand that's been there since, gosh, the 1920s, 1930s. And
These stars weren't actually there, but my dad's pretending like they were. Ginger Roger and, let's see, Clark Gable, Shirley Temple. Humphrey Bogart actually flew over Strickland's. Betty Davis stopped by. They all stopped by and got some ice cream in classic cars. This is my dad's remembrance of a Strickland's near a hometown of my dad's in Summersville, West Virginia. And there's an old post office in Lakemore back in the day, and my dad drew some pictures of the old cars driving by, picking up their mail. These are old restaurant signs my dad remembers from an old root beer stand and the corral that's near my parents' house. Strickland's ice cream again. And this, let's see here. This is an old wooden church. See, my dad's very artistic, just like I am.
I got my trustees down.
Tell her to camera to keep that 2 one of that. The evil eye. Meow. Say hello, Smokey. Say hello.
Got her.
Don't you dare. Give it back.
Hey guys, wave! Stick out your tongue. Stick out your tongue. Go. Stick out your tongue.
I need a heavy one too.
What?
Don't put that in this face.
Whoa, damn, dude.
Hi, Josie!
You might be a redneck if...
Together.
Get her, go!